Hello, YouTube. So I spent some time in the car today driving back from the lovely 70-degree weather at the coast of the Pacific Ocean. And I was heading back into the 115-degree weather in my little valley of the sun that I reside in. So over the course of the drive, I was driving by myself, and I found myself thinking about a particular topic that I will share with you, which is this difficulty that we have as human beings in holding two opposing emotions together at the same time. I see this in myself. I see this in a lot of my patients. This is one of the difficulties and the struggles that we encounter when we are dealing with crisis, stressful situations, or just life in general. Holding these two opposing things together that seem like incongruent with one another. So an example would be if you think back to 9/11, when the World Trade Center and the Pentagon were hit by a terrorist act, and there were some women who were pregnant who lost spouses in either the World Trade Center or the Pentagon or the planes that hit all of them. So one of the difficulties that they experienced was the fact that here they are pregnant, and you could label a lot of the emotions with a pregnancy of joy, new life, all these things, and at the same time they're grieving. So there's joy and there's sadness from the loss of their spouse. There's birth or impending birth, and they just experienced death. These two completely disparate, incongruent kinds of things that they're experiencing. And I believe our task in the healing journey is to fully experience both, or sometimes even more than two. There could be multiple things happening. And what's particularly difficult on our journeys is the expression of emotions in particular that are deemed dark or less than. Now, I realize in saying that the emotions that are associated with being bad change culturally, and it's a matter of context. So, for example, for women to express something like anger, that's kind of a dark emotion. Women are not, it's not feminine to get angry, right? And for men, it might be almost the opposite. So for men to express their grief in a way that's deemed more feminine, don't be a sissy. Don't cry in public. Don't express your grief in that way. Don't express your grief. There's a different pressure on men, and it often has to do with the masculine or the feminine expression of said emotion, right? Things that are deemed feminine, men are not supposed to express, and things that are deemed masculine, women are not supposed to express. So let me give you an example from my own personal life. For the past couple years, I've been dealing with a stressful situation. And in dealing with said stressful situation, I have sought help from various helper people. And one of the things that I have struggled with has been, I would say historically, has been the expression of anger. Maybe it's partly because I'm feminine, because that's not a feminine thing to do, to get angry. Also, my particular roots, experiences in childhood, etc., are more like, don't get angry. So that's been a difficult emotion for me to even acknowledge that I experience. That's one of my shadow complexes, as the Jungians say, right? So let me tell you said scenario. So I'm working with this helper person, and particularly dealing with a lot of the stressful situation I alluded to. I'm processing that kind of stuff. And said helper person does something that's absolutely trivial, right? That angers me. And it also, I mean, and this is common when you're dealing with something like this, complex, right? This is something that I don't like about myself. So I need, and this is where Jung talks about like the need to push something away from yourself. Like, that's not me. I hate that. Ugh. So in this sad scenario, I mean, it's probably something I do worse than the example that I'm alluding to, right? So this person does something that's something that I do way worse, right? And it angers me. And what happens? Well, Jen has this history of massive suppression of anger. I'm not angry. I don't get angry. I am not an angry person. I'm a loving person. Yeah. So what happens? In said scenario, you know, from my perspective, right, seemingly out of the blue, I am erupting like Mount Vesuvius, and the volcano is exploding, which erupts onto said helper person. The lava explodes, and more or less burns up the therapeutic relationship with this person, and I'm left, staring at. I mean, the mountain's gone. It's now all a blackened, charred space. I've been harmed, said helper person has been harmed, and it's just like it's gone. The mountain's blown off, right? Because of this expression really of something erupting from the deep. Shadow stuff suppressed for large amounts of time, and my own need and delusion to kind of go, I don't get angry. And not only that, but the typical thing, and this is what we do as human beings, we need to not see whatever it is in ourselves, so we see it in somebody else. So we then trigger whatever gets triggered, then we go, oh yeah, but that was there, like we want to push it onto them, right? This is, I mean, I'm in mental health, I should know better, right? But all the same, when it's your own stuff, you're like you're blinded to your own stuff. So that's a really good example of the kind of thing that happens. The more you push something down, and in my case, suppressed for years, right? I don't get angry. Because that's not appropriate for me to express that. And then when it does erupt, it has a lot of power. So in physics, the example would be when you have a gas, the pressure of said gas increases based on the amount of space. So when the space is compressed, then the pressure increases, right? So in my case, it gets pushed further and further and further and further, like more robustly pushed down. Thus, it gains more and more energy in order to completely erupt onto the unsuspecting therapist that goes, wow, that was out of proportion to whatever it is that happened. You must be crazy, right? I mean, yeah. So, all that to say, there can be a massive amount of energy, and we can empower our shadow side by, number one, not allowing the expression of it. Number two, okay, so I've heard people say, or even read blogs or whatever, where people will say, oh, just choose your emotions, choose not to be angry. And that's baloney. That's bullshit. You can't really choose not to feel. If you can, you have that in common with, say, a serial killer. Because serial killers can go, yeah, I can make a bloody mess out of this person and I don't actually feel any emotions about it. Or maybe I even feel inverse, crazy, like joy or something ridiculous in killing somebody or whatever. That's where that goes. No. We don't choose our emotions. What we choose rather is how we can respond to emotions and how we can channel emotions. So in this case with my helper person, is it good to be Mount Vesuvius? No. Trust me. Take my word for it. Don't be Mount Vesuvius. It's not a good plan for you. Trust me. You don't want that. Rather though, so let's go to another example. There's a geyser in Wyoming called Old Faithful. Same energy coming up from the tectonic plates below the Earth's surface. Geologists beware, right? Erupts every 60 to 90 minutes. And what happens? Well, when it explodes, it is merely boiling water that comes out of the Earth rather than boiling lava that burns everything within a 25-mile radius. And so you can actually approach Old Faithful and watch it erupt. And it's, people tried to take photos of Mount St. Helens and etc., any other exploding volcano, and some of them died in trying to take photos. Now, Old Faithful? Enceladus took photos of Old Faithful. You can get closer safely, right? Less difficult energy to deal with because it gets expressed regularly and it's a little more chilled. Hot springs, another example, very similar to Old Faithful, right? You have hot springs that express the energy from the tectonic plates shifting, and it's boiling water, and not even boiling water, it's warm water with lots of sulfur in it that are actually healing oftentimes. So here's the spectrum. Healing energy boiling up from below because it gets expressed regularly and more calmly, or Mount Vesuvius. Don't be Mount Vesuvius. Express it. So, all that to say, we can't decide to feel the anger. What we can decide rather is how we respond to it. We can decide to learn to channel it. Emphasis on learning to channel it. Because here's the thing, the longer it's been suppressed, the more likely it is that when it does come out, it's going to be kind of messy. It's going to be kind of a bloody mess. So if that's the case, maybe prepare for that, be cautious, understand that this is the way it is, and try to figure out venues to express it in that involve water rather than lava. And again, like getting back to the beginning of what I said, which is this holding these two disparate emotions together. The point in life is to learn to express and hold the two things together. We have to integrate the shadow. We have to realize it's there, and that's the beginning of it. Recognize it's there. Recognize, no, as much as I want to see myself as this like altruistic person who doesn't get angry, I get angry. And that's okay. That's just being human. That keeps me from being a serial killer. Good job, Jen. Don't be a serial killer. So that's the point. Walk towards expressing the shadow and also allowing space for it. Because again, as I said in the analogy with physics, the less space there is, the more the pressure goes up. So, from both sides. So, something that I do, like I said, I'm guilty of being that patient that went off on said therapist. I've also had that happen to me. And there are two things that can happen, right? The space can expand to some extent. We all have, as a helper healer kind of person, we all have a, a certain capacity for holding shit, space holding. And we can work to expand our capacity. That's part of our work as therapists. I'm not a therapist. I work with it in different ways, but part of that is being able to hold the space, and some people hold the space differently. That's one piece. But the other piece is from the other side, allowing, as a patient, as a client, working to express it in ways that are less volcanic and more geyser like, or more hot springs like. Be the hot springs, not the volcano. Okay, we'll revisit this, but thanks for tuning in. The coast, that's where we should be right now. 70 degrees in Southern California for the 4th. It was awesome. 115 in Phoenix. Phoenix? More like the volcano. Coast? More like the hot springs. I'm feeling my calling to move to the coast. Thanks for tuning in. Audio.